The notification pinged at exactly 3:47 a.m. when Karen's spirituality posted what would become the most disastrous prediction of her career. With her purple crystal necklace gleaming under ring lights and her 847,000 followers hanging on every word, the self-proclaimed psychic medium leaned into her camera with absolute confidence. "I'm getting some seriously dark energy from Judge Judy," she declared, her voice dripping with mystical authority. "The spirits are telling me this woman carries negative vibrations that could destroy anyone who crosses her path. Her aura is literally black. Guys, I've never seen anything like it." Karen's comments section exploded instantly, with heart emojis and fire symbols as her devoted followers praised her spiritual courage for calling out the famous TV judge. What Karen didn't realize was that Judge Judy Shinlin had built a 40-year legal career on one simple principle: facts don't care about your feelings, and the truth always wins. While Karen was busy reading energy fields and chakras, Judge Judy was methodically building cases that sent real criminals to real prisons. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. On one side, a woman who claimed to speak with spirits, and on the other, a legal powerhouse who spoke only in evidence and precedent. But here's what Karen's crystal ball failed to reveal. Judge Judy had already been quietly investigating Karen's business practices for weeks, and what she discovered would not only destroy Karen's spiritual empire, but expose a web of fraud that ran deeper than anyone imagined. The psychic who claimed to predict everyone else's future was about to learn that some people don't just have dark energy, they have the power to make your worst nightmares come true. If you think you know how this spiritual showdown ends, think again. Hit that like button because this story gets absolutely insane, and I guarantee you won't see the twist coming. Karen's initial video about Judge Judy's dark energy went viral overnight, racking up 2.3 million views and trending on 3 different platforms. Drunk on the attention and convinced she had tapped into something powerful, Karen decided to double down in the most spectacular way possible. Over the next 72 hours, she released a series of increasingly bold videos, each one more damning than the last. "Judge Judy's energy is so toxic, it's literally affecting my third eye," she claimed in her second video, dramatically pressing her fingers to her forehead. "The ancestors are showing me courtroom scenes filled with darkness and manipulation. This woman has been feeding off negative energy for decades." Her followers ate it up like spiritual candy. The comment sections became echo chambers of validation, with thousands of users sharing their own bad vibes about the famous judge. Karen's merchandise sales skyrocketed as people bought her protection from dark energy crystals and aura-cleansing candles. She started hosting live streams where she would dramatically read Judge Judy's energy from afar, claiming the judge's negativity was so powerful, it was giving her headaches through the screen. "I'm literally getting nauseous just thinking about her courtroom," Karen announced during one particularly theatrical performance, fanning herself with sage. But what Karen didn't know was that Judge Judy's granddaughter had sent her the viral videos with a simple text: "Grandma, you need to see this." Judge Judy watched every single video with the same laser focus she brought to her courtroom, taking notes in her precise handwriting. While Karen was performing for her audience, Judy was doing what she did best: building a case. She wasn't angry, she was curious. In 40 years of law, she had seen every type of fraud imaginable, and something about Karen's operation felt familiar. The turning point came when Karen made her fatal mistake. Emboldened by her growing fame, she posted a direct challenge: "Judge Judy, if you're watching this, I dare you to come on my show. Let's see whose energy is stronger, your courtroom negativity or my spiritual light." Little did Karen know, she had just poked a legal legend who had never backed down from a challenge in her entire career, and who was already 3 steps ahead in a game Karen didn't even know she was playing. Judge Judy's response came exactly 48 hours later, delivered not through social media theatrics, but through a carefully crafted statement that would become legendary in legal circles. Standing in her pristine office, surrounded by law books and decades of legal victories, she addressed Karen's challenge with the surgical precision that had made her a household name. "I've been made aware of certain individuals making claims about my character and energy," she began, her voice carrying that unmistakable authority that had silenced thousands of defendants. "While I typically don't respond to online entertainment, when someone builds a business on making false claims about others, that becomes a legal matter." But Judy wasn't just defending herself. She was launching a counterattack that would expose the entire foundation of Karen's empire. "I'm curious about the credentials of someone who claims to read energy through a computer screen," Judy continued, her tone becoming sharper with each word. "What licensing board oversees psychic readings? What consumer protections exist for people paying hundreds of dollars for spiritual advice? Most importantly, what happens when that advice proves harmful?" These weren't rhetorical questions, they were the opening arguments in a case that Karen didn't even realize was being built against her. Within hours, Judy's statement was everywhere, analyzed by legal experts and shared across platforms. The psychic community, which had initially rallied behind Karen, suddenly found themselves facing uncomfortable questions. Other spiritual influencers began distancing themselves, recognizing that Judy had just turned the spotlight on an entire industry that operated in legal gray areas. Karen's confident smile began to crack as she realized this wasn't just about energy readings anymore, it was about business practices, consumer fraud, and federal regulations. She had never bothered to research. The most devastating blow came when Judy casually mentioned that she had reviewed publicly available information about certain business practices and found interesting patterns worth investigating. Karen's followers started asking questions they had never asked before. Where did Karen get her psychic certification? Why were her predictions so vague? How many of her readings had actually come true? For the first time since building her spiritual empire, Karen found herself on the defensive, and she was completely unprepared for a fight against someone who had spent 4 decades winning battles with facts instead of feelings. What happened next proved that Judge Judy's real superpower wasn't reading energy, it was reading people and their patterns of deception. Within 72 hours of her statement, Judy had quietly assembled a team that would make any prosecutor jealous. She didn't just randomly attack Karen's business. She methodically dissected it with the precision of a forensic accountant, using nothing but publicly available information, business registrations, and consumer complaint databases. Judy began connecting dots that painted a disturbing picture of Karen's spiritual empire. The first crack in Karen's facade appeared when Judy's team discovered that Karen's spirituality wasn't Karen's real name at all. Birth records showed she was actually Karen Michelle Thompson from Akron, Ohio, who had legally changed her name just 3 years earlier when she started her psychic business. More damning was her employment history. Karen had previously worked as a telemarketer for a payday loan company that was shut down by the Federal Trade Commission for predatory practices. The woman who claimed to channel ancient wisdom had spent 5 years cold-calling vulnerable people to trap them in high-interest debt cycles, but Judy was just getting started. Her investigation revealed that Karen's spiritual certification came from an online course that cost $79 and took 2 hours to complete. The ancient techniques she claimed to use were copy-pasted from free websites about tarot reading. Most shocking of all, Karen had been recycling the same generic predictions for hundreds of clients, simply changing names and minor details. One former client came forward with screenshots showing that Karen had given her the exact same personalized spiritual reading that had been posted on a psychic forum 2 years earlier. The floodgates opened when Judge Judy's investigation went public. Former clients began sharing their stories on social media, revealing a pattern of emotional manipulation and financial exploitation that stretched back years. Maria Santos from Phoenix paid Karen $1,200 for a spiritual cleansing that never happened. David Chen from Seattle spent $800 on protective crystals that turned out to be colored glass, bought wholesale from China. Most heartbreaking was Sandra Williams, a grieving mother who paid Karen $2,500 for sessions to communicate with her deceased son, only to discover that Karen was using information from the son's public social media profiles to create fake messages. The psychic community that had once embraced Karen now turned against her with the fury of people who realized they had been made accomplices in a fraud. Legitimate spiritual practitioners began publicly denouncing her methods, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Karen's follower count plummeted as people discovered they had been following a carefully constructed lie. The woman who had built her empire by claiming to predict other people's futures found herself completely blindsided by her own rapidly approaching downfall, while Judge Judy watched from the sidelines, knowing that the best revenge wasn't mystical, it was methodical. Moment Karen's world truly began to collapse wasn't marked by dramatic music or mystical signs. It was announced by a simple email notification. At 6:23 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, the Federal Trade Commission had officially opened an investigation into her business practices, citing credible evidence of consumer fraud and deceptive advertising. Within hours, state attorney generals from 7 different states had joined the investigation, each representing dozens of victims who had been financially exploited by Karen's spiritual scams. The woman who claimed to see the future had somehow missed the legal avalanche that was about to bury her empire. Judge Judy's methodical investigation had provided law enforcement with a roadmap they could follow with devastating efficiency. Bank records subpoenaed by federal investigators revealed that Karen had collected over $3.2 million from her spiritual services in just 2 years, with some individual clients paying upwards of $15,000 for intensive soul-healing packages that consisted of nothing more than pre-written emails and mass-produced trinkets. The evidence was so overwhelming that even Karen's own lawyers advised her to consider a plea bargain before criminal charges were filed. But the legal troubles were just the beginning of Karen's nightmare. Major social media platforms, terrified of liability issues, began systematically removing her content and suspending her accounts. YouTube deleted her channel with its 847,000 subscribers overnight, citing violations of their policies against fraudulent health and wellness claims. Instagram followed suit, removing not just her main account but also the dozens of fake accounts she had been using to artificially boost her engagement. TikTok banned her entirely, and even smaller platforms like Twitch and Discord closed her communities. In less than 48 hours, Karen's digital empire, which had taken 3 years to build, was completely erased from the internet. The most devastating blow came from her own followers, the people who had once worshipped her every word. When investigative journalists published the full scope of Karen's deception, including audio recordings of her laughing about her gullible clients during private phone calls, the betrayal cut deep. Sarah Peterson, who had been one of Karen's most devoted supporters and had spent $8,000 on various spiritual packages, posted a tearful video that went viral. "I defended her against everyone. I thought Judge Judy was just jealous of her spiritual gifts, but Karen was literally reading from scripts and calling us idiots behind our backs." The comment section filled with similar stories of betrayal, financial loss, and shattered trust. Karen attempted damage control with a desperate livestream from her apartment, but it only made things worse. Gone was the confident spiritual guru surrounded by crystals and candles. Instead, viewers saw a panicked woman in a messy room, stumbling over explanations and making contradictory claims about her innocence. When she tried to blame Judge Judy for orchestrating a legal attack on spiritual freedom, even her remaining supporters could see through the desperate deflection. The livestream, which she hoped would save her reputation, instead became evidence in the federal case against her. The irony wasn't lost on anyone following the story. Judge Judy, who had never claimed any psychic abilities, had accurately predicted Karen's downfall with nothing more than careful observation and legal expertise. While Karen was busy reading imaginary energy fields, Judy had been reading the very real patterns of fraud that always led to the same inevitable conclusion. The judge's prediction that Karen's deceptive practices would catch up with her proved more accurate than any mystical prophecy Karen had ever made. As news broke that Karen was facing potential federal charges carrying up to 20 years in prison, along with civil lawsuits seeking millions in damages, the spiritual influencer who had once claimed to control cosmic forces found herself completely powerless against the earthly consequences of her actions. Judge Judy's systematic dismantling of Karen's empire hadn't required any supernatural intervention, just the kind of methodical justice that had made her famous in the first place. This story gets even crazier because what Judge Judy did next shocked everyone. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell because you absolutely won't believe the final twist that's coming. Karen's public apology came 3 weeks after her empire collapsed, delivered from the same ringlet setup where she had once confidently declared Judge Judy's energy to be dark and toxic. But the woman sitting before the camera bore little resemblance to the spiritual guru who had commanded nearly 1 million followers. Her purple crystal necklace was gone, replaced by a simple black sweater. Her confident mystical demeanor had crumbled into barely contained desperation. "I want to sincerely apologize to Judge Judy and to anyone who may have been hurt by my actions," she began, her voice shaking. "I realize now that I made serious mistakes in how I conducted my business and in the claims I made about my abilities." The apology video, which garnered only 12,000 views compared to her previous millions, felt hollow and calculated. Legal experts immediately recognized it as a carefully scripted attempt to mitigate damages in the upcoming criminal trial. Karen claimed she had been guided by genuine spiritual beliefs, and insisted that she never intended to deceive anyone, but the evidence of her deliberate fraud was too overwhelming for anyone to believe her sudden transformation into a remorseful victim of her own delusions. Comments on the video were disabled, but social media users found other ways to express their skepticism and anger. Judge Judy's final statement on the matter came during a rare interview, and it delivered a masterclass in measured justice. This case wasn't about attacking someone's spiritual beliefs, she explained with characteristic precision. It was about protecting consumers from deliberate financial exploitation disguised as spiritual guidance. When someone charges thousands of dollars for services they know they cannot provide, that's fraud, regardless of whether they wrap it in crystals and mysticism. Her words carried the weight of 4 decades in law, and they resonated far beyond Karen's specific case, sparking conversations about accountability in the unregulated spiritual wellness industry. The legal consequences for Karen continued to mount with devastating efficiency. Federal prosecutors filed 23 counts of wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit consumer fraud. The IRS opened its own investigation after discovering that Karen had failed to report most of her spiritual income, owing an estimated $847,000 in back taxes and penalties. Civil lawsuits from 127 former clients sought over $4.2 million in damages, with some cases involving elderly victims who had mortgaged their homes to pay for Karen's spiritual services. Her assets were frozen, her luxury apartment was seized, and she was forced to move back in with her parents in Ohio while awaiting trial. The psychic and spiritual community's reaction revealed deep fractures that Karen's scandal had exposed. Legitimate practitioners who had spent years building ethical practices found themselves defending their entire industry against increased scrutiny. Many spiritual counselors began voluntarily adopting transparency measures, posting their actual qualifications and offering clear refund policies to distance themselves from Karen's fraudulent methods. Professional organizations started implementing stricter ethical guidelines, recognizing that Karen's case had given ammunition to skeptics who wanted to dismiss all spiritual practices as scams. Perhaps most telling was how quickly Karen's former collaborators and fellow spiritual influencers abandoned her. Psychics who had once appeared on her shows claimed they had always sensed something off about her energy. Spiritual retailers stopped selling her branded products overnight. The spiritual conference circuit, where Karen had been a featured speaker just months earlier, blacklisted her permanently. The community that had once embraced her as a rising star now treated her as a cautionary tale about what happens when greed masquerades as enlightenment. The broader lesson extended far beyond the spiritual community. Karen's downfall became a case study in business schools and law enforcement, training programs about the dangers of challenging established figures without proper preparation. She had assumed that Judge Judy's legal expertise was confined to television courtrooms, failing to realize that real legal power extends far beyond cameras and scripted drama. The psychic who claimed to see hidden truths had been completely blind to the most obvious truth of all. When you build a house of lies, it only takes one person with the right tools to bring it all crashing down. The ultimate irony of Karen's spectacular downfall wasn't just that a psychic failed to predict her own future, it was that she was destroyed by someone who never claimed any supernatural abilities at all. Judge Judy's victory came through old-fashioned detective work, legal expertise, and an unwavering commitment to facts over fiction. While Karen was busy reading imaginary energy fields and consulting non-existent spirits, Judy was reading bank records, business registrations, and consumer complaints. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Mystical mumbo-jumbo versus methodical investigation, and the real world won decisively. This case sent shockwaves through the entire online spiritual industry, forcing influencers to confront uncomfortable questions about accountability and authenticity. The Karen scandal became a watershed moment that divided legitimate spiritual practitioners from opportunistic fraudsters. Many genuine counselors welcomed the increased scrutiny, knowing that cleaning up their industry would ultimately benefit everyone except the scammers. But for those who had built empires on false promises and manufactured mysticism, Karen's downfall served as a terrifying warning about what happens when the real world comes knocking. The broader lesson extends far beyond crystals and tarot cards. In an age of social media influence and online personalities, Karen's story reminds us that authentic expertise always trumps manufactured authority. Judge Judy didn't need millions of followers or viral videos to destroy Karen's empire. She just needed facts, patience, and the kind of real-world credibility that can't be faked or bought. Karen learned too late that when you challenge someone who deals in truth for a living, you better make sure your own foundation can withstand scrutiny. The psychic who claimed to see everyone else's future had been completely blind to her own impending disaster, while the judge who never claimed mystical powers proved more prophetic than any fortune teller. What did you think about this epic clash between mysticism and reality? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story showed you the power of facts over fiction, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because we've got more jaw-dropping stories of truth triumphing over deception coming your way.